Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Neurodivergent Thinkers. Today, we're going to be talking about masking. First, we'll introduce ourselves. So again, I am Sophie Neno. I'm the director of NBCS, and these are my two lovely co-hosts.
Hi, I'm Drina. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm 19 years old.
Hi, I'm Jessica. My pronouns are she, her, and I identify as autistic, and I'm 21 years old.
I
Awesome.
also identify as autistic.
Thank you. And today we thought in the back to school period of time, everyone's going back to school, there's lots going on. We thought a great topic that would tie nicely into back to school is the topic of masking. So Drina's going to kick us off by letting us know what the definition of masking is and why neurodivergent individuals typically end up masking throughout their day.
Hi, everyone. Like Sophie said, today we're going to be talking about masking. Masking is a really, really important topic, especially in the autistic community, because autistic people will always find themselves masking in situations where they're uncomfortable or where they feel they have to appear normal or neurotypical. Masking is when neurodiverse people, in this case, we're talking about autistic people, mask the traits that make them autistic in order to fit in and appear neurotypical in our society. This can happen in school, in the workplace, even just hanging out with friends. It's anywhere where autistic people feel the survival instinct to fit in. So they mask the parts of them that are most authentic so that people around them will treat them more normally and more humanly.
And also, the reason why we're kind of combining this with like back to school is because, in my personal experience, uh, back to school is kind of when I mask the most because a lot of times it's a new year, it's a new, new people all around you, and that's when I feel I have to mask the most. So it may be different for other people, but we just thought masking and back to school kind of go hand in hand. So yeah.
I agree. I find back to school is really the time where I start masking the most, especially when I'm going to be meeting a lot of new people that I don't know, and maybe I'm not comfortable revealing I'm autistic yet, or I just kind of want to go unnoticed. Masking is something I definitely do.
So now that we know what masking is, why it typically happens, some places where it typically happens, let's talk a little bit about your personal experiences with masking. Jessica, why don't you tell us a little bit about what masking means to you or personal experiences that you've had with masking in your life?
So masking really for me is putting on this facade of normal, trying to be normal for other people. Um, I think it's very well known in society that people who are different get treated different. And it's kind of, I want to say masking is kind of a learned skill. And it's not exactly the greatest learned skill. Um, I know that in a lot of social situations, masking has held me back because I've had to pretend to be someone I wasn't. And it's almost like being afraid to be yourself and like talk about who you are or share your values, stuff like that. And that's all I got for right now.
Yeah, that's okay. And I just have a follow-up question. So when you say masking tends to or did hold you back in social situations, do you mean in reference to making authentic connections to other people?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that and also perhaps confronting certain situations in like when there's like a person of authority and maybe you don't quite agree with them or what they've done and you really want to call the person out on it, but you can't.
Yeah. Yeah, that's totally fair. Thank you for sharing that, Jessica. Drina, did you have anything that you wanted to share as well with your experiences in masking?
I agree a lot with what Jessica said in the sense that masking is both a learned and kind of an unconscious skill. It's something as you get older, you get better at and you're more aware of it. I agree. Masking's really something I do in social situations, especially school, especially with friends that I'm not as comfortable with or I haven't known as for a long time. I also agree with the sense in authority figures that often an authority figure will do something maybe that I'm not as comfortable with, but the neurotypical way to deal with that situation is to just be quiet, not say anything, keep the peace. And I think that can be really problematic for me, especially if that certain situation really is important to me or it's about me specifically. I feel like I can't speak up for myself. I just kind of am in this box of not who I am. I'm more just this shy person that I'm not. And I find that that's really, really hard as somebody who really enjoys advocating for themselves.
Yeah. So it kind of sounds like in a lot of situations where individuals are masking, it's choosing between being your authentic self and being seen as your authentic self and being able to make connections as your authentic self, or almost this like survival instinct and fitting in and not putting yourself in the line of fire or in a space where you could be othered or excluded or rejected or, face unpleasant things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And beyond that, so what would you say the impact of masking on mental health and well-being is?
It can be it can be pretty drastic. I know, speaking from experience, that when I go to work or when I go to school, oftentimes at the end of the day, I'm exhausted. I'm done. I don't want to talk to people. I don't want to do anything. I just want to go home and sleep. And that's something I've noticed happening more in my later years. It's kind of, and I think it's always been happening, but like now that I'm older, I notice I'm like, yeah, I'm really tired after a day of like having to fit in. And I didn't notice that before when I was younger.
Mhm.
Um, I think it has also taken a toll on my mental health at times. Um, I've been through some hard stuff, and yeah.
Absolutely. And I wonder if that maybe you didn't recognize it, like the physiological signs that your body was telling you as a child, but I wonder if that came out in different ways, like parents that are, sending their kiddos to school and the school's like, "Oh yeah, they held it. They're totally great at school, no problems. They work really well with their EA." And then the parents are like, "Well, I don't understand. When they get home, they're completely having a meltdown. They're in a bad mood. They don't want anything to do with us." So I wonder if that maybe showed up a little bit differently for you, but uh, would that be something that parents should kind of be mindful of with a neurodivergent child?
I mean, what you just said, that's exactly how it showed up in my
Mhm.
earlier years for my parents. Sorry, mom and dad. But yeah, I think parents of neurodiverse children should really be aware that, if your child is acting out like after school and maybe, yeah, they've had a good day at school, but maybe you should take the time to ask them how they're feeling, and above all else, give them the space to recharge, to do whatever needs to happen for them to be in a better space, because your child's just going to continue to act out if they're not given the space after a long day to just sit and recharge.
Yeah. And they might not be able to tell you, hey, mom and dad, I've been masking all day and now I'm mentally burnt out, and that's manifesting in like a physical burnout as well. But it might be, the parents recognizing, hey, I can tell this has been a tough day. I can tell you need some time to recharge. Let me know what you need. Would that be a helpful response?
Yeah, yeah, it would.
I'd like to add to what Jessica said, and I agree. I think, especially for me personally, a lot of that burnt out exhaustion when I was younger, when I wasn't quite old enough or aware of what masking was, a lot of it manifested in meltdowns when I got home, disagreements with my parents. And I think as I've gotten older and after I got diagnosed and I started understanding who I was, those things started to reduce. But in my family, and uh, my brother and I are both autistic, as well as my mom, that we have an agreement that when we come home from school, that we'll say hi and we'll say, I had a good day, but then we have like 20, 30 minutes of downtime where we can just go in our room, we can maybe sleep, we can draw, eat a snack, and where we just kind of have that time to ourselves. And then once those 20, 30 minutes are up and we're feeling a little more regulated, we'll come upstairs and tell you about our day. And I find that's super helpful because I don't have to have that pressure of, oh, I have to indulge my parents about my day as soon as I get home. I have a bit of leeway room. And I find that's super, super helpful.
Yeah, because the second you get home, that's your safe place. Hopefully, that's your safe place, and that's your time to unmask and to kind of just let everything out and decompress. But you can't do that if your parents or people in your home are expecting you to continue the facade or the masking and to talk about your day and to give more when you're already coming from a very, very empty bucket by the time you've gotten home.
I agree. And I also would like to add that, yes, it can be really frustrating when me or my brother comes home and we've had a meltdown. But one thing I want you to recognize is that your child really trusts you. They feel like, oh, this is a safe space. I can unmask. And maybe right now, the way that that's manifesting can be frustrating. It's a sign of your kids saying, this is a safe place and I trust you. And that's really important.
I love that, Drina. That's a great message. Thank you. All right, part two, we're going to be talking about societal expectations and pressures. So some of the things I'd love to get your perspective on, Jessica and Drina, are how societal norms and expectations contribute to masking, and including school systems, workplaces that actually are set up to almost encourage masking and neurodiverse individuals to mask.
Yeah, uh, yeah.
All right, part two. Now we're going to be diving into societal expectations and pressures. So, how societal norms and expectations contribute to masking, and that's including education systems and workplaces, and just the impact of these expectations, how it contributes to masking.
Today, I want to talk about a lot of my personal experiences with how school specifically has contributed to a lot of my masking.
Mhm.
When I was in elementary, I don't think I really had a name for masking at the time. I didn't even know I was autistic. I just knew that I had to do a lot to try to fit in. And I think a lot of it had to do with autism and kind of understanding what being autistic is has come a long way since I was in elementary. And I feel like a lot of the times teachers would want me to con to be what they expected of me, someone who would sit and pay attention in class or be really good at making friends and hanging out with other people. And I really wasn't that. I felt a lot of pressure to be quiet or not fidget or to be with the other girls in my class, even though they didn't really always like me or I didn't really know how to socialize. I've come a long way at social cues, but it's definitely something that continued throughout high school. And fortunately, not as much as in college now, but in high school especially. In high school, I felt it was even more pressure than it was in elementary because of being a teenager, becoming more aware of who I was. I got diagnosed. And just high school is a time where a lot of people understandably change and they're starting to figure out their identities. So I was starting to be more scrutinized. I was more under the pressure of other people. So I felt a lot of pressure to just kind of be a kid who does her work, is good, doesn't really disrupt the class, uh, do everything I can to try to make myself normal, whether that was maybe not fidgeting or not, or pretending to socialize more than I really wanted to.
Yeah.
I really felt like it was a lot, and when I would really have to mentally prepare before even going to school that okay, I'm gonna have to not be my authentic self, go to school for like 5, 6 hours, and come home and just be drained, exhausted, and just dealing with a lot of life's changes at the time too was not very helpful.
No, of
So
course.
I think it was definitely a lot. Now I'm in college and I don't mask as much in college. I mean, I mask a little bit. Understandably, I'm still going to school, but there's a lot less masking involved as I feel I can be a lot more of my authentic self. And
I'm
that's really nice.
I'm happy to hear that. And I do, school systems especially, I know some workplaces are different, but I know school systems especially are a lot about conformity. The school system in itself really hasn't changed very much since the 1920s. Realistically, how
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
teach, the structure, the expectations, it hasn't actually changed all that much since then, which is insane. And I think that aspect of conformity can be tough enough for neurotypical children, but almost
Absolutely.
near impossible for neurodiverse individuals. And that's why, they're putting all of their spare energy, everything they have into just surviving that day at school and conforming and fitting in. And then we get home and we've got nothing left, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I also feel like I was I'm a female, so I've been socialized as a female, and so a lot of the times there's the term boys will be boys in the sense that boys kind of get more leeway room to kind of be if they're a little quirkier, they're a little less social. It's chalk it up to like stereotypes, while girls are expected in our society to be not troublesome, to kind of follow the rules. And a lot of that, just being a girl, there's a lot of societal expectations that led me to masking even more due to that.
Mhm.
And
And
it's a lot of those reasons why girls mask is the reason, and we're so good at it because of those societal norms that we're not diagnosed as often.
yeah, absolutely. Or very late.
Yes, that
Mhm.
too.
Yeah. Yeah. Jessica, what are your thoughts on that area?
I mean, like, yeah, through my school, um, in elementary school, I knew I was different before I knew I was autistic, and it led to me masking so hard that I created a new personality for myself. And it wasn't a very nice personality, but it basically consisted of trying to be popular because that's what's expected. You're only going to do good and socially in school if you're popular. And it ended up making me not a very nice person to be around. And it also ended up with me making some problematic friends. By middle school, I stopped caring about being popular, and I kind of started being aware that that wasn't who I was. And I started also feeling the burdens of masking and how tiring it is and how exhausting it is, and also being more aware of the social pressures of people expect you to be a certain way, and if you don't fit that picture, then once again you're labeled as different and people will see you different, and therefore they will treat you different. And that's kind of my experience through the school system. um Now once I graduated, like Drina, once I got into college, in my case university, I started to be able to connect with people who really really I don't need to mask around them, and I can be my authentic self. And it's nice. It is wonderful that I can just, it's less exhausting, it's less draining, and it's nice to be around people who can see me for who I am and not for some predetermined picture of the perfect person that society has deemed.
And it sounds like you're making more genuine connections. You have a stronger sense of belonging because you're connecting with people as your authentic self, more so than
Yes.
you were before, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And I know we also want to talk about now some productive things that we can do, some advice, some coping mechanisms and strategies that we can offer, either teachers listening, parents listening, anyone listening, really, neurodivergent individuals who struggle with masking, as well. So a couple of the strategies we talked about, I know one of them was talking about getting an IEP and adaptations in areas that can alleviate stress, like giving extra time, a test time, or taking exams in a separate area, or providing, safe spaces for neurodiverse individuals to go to if they're feeling overwhelmed and they need to stim or just go to a safe space. And that would
Absolutely.
go ahead, Gina.
I find personally that having an IEP throughout high school, and now it's kind of known as accessibility services in college, was the reason I was so successful. I don't think high school would have been as successful had I really not gotten those services. So I'm really grateful to those services. The process of getting those services wasn't easy, but I learned I had to work with the system to get those services because those services were so helpful. Part of getting an IEP is learning to advocate for yourself, to say, hey, actually, these things are really, really important to me to have. So for personally, in my IEP and in my accessibility services, I have the ability to have extra time on tests, to have my tests in a different room, to have my tests be done on a computer. Most of the time now, it is already on a computer, but before, certain things like English papers, I was able to type instead of physically write. I also have someone who takes notes for me so that I can actually focus all my energy into paying attention to what's happening in the class rather than trying to multitask and write notes and go, oh no, I missed something, and then I'm not list and then I didn't know what they were going to say and I'm focused. And so I found that's been really helpful. So making sure that not only you express your needs, but you also stay firm with them
Yeah.
and allow people to know, hey, this actually really works. And I'm really grateful for them.
Yeah, and for children who are maybe too young, or maybe people who aren't able to advocate for themselves yet, the caregivers or the parents involved, it's really important for them to step into that advocacy role, right?
I agree. I think if an autistic person or child isn't ready to necessarily advocate for themselves, I think it's important for the parents to step in, or guardian, or whoever is taking care of them. But I think it's still extremely important to make sure that that autistic person is involved in the process. A
That's
parent can help be a support and be a bigger voice, but it does, just because an autistic person isn't completely ready to advocate alone doesn't mean that they should be completely shut off from that conversation. They should be in there at every meeting
I
because it's about them.
yeah, I totally agree, Drina, and that's about, giving them their voice, right? Uh,
Absolutely.
And just a little plug here, my consultant hat on. You are, as a parent, as a caregiver, allowed to bring whoever you need to bring into those IEP meetings, whether that be a consultant, a trusted friend, a family member, because sometimes when we're feeling really emotionally connected to something, that might be difficult for us to see things clearly and to advocate clearly in those moments. So always bringing someone in with you, I think, is a good piece of advice. You can bring your consultant, your OT, your SLP, a trusted family friend, a trusted um, uh, family member. And then, like you said, Drina, always super important to have that individual that the meeting is about involved in making decisions for their own care and support, right? Giving them their voice as well.
Absolutely. I'm going to add that in previous high school ones, Sophie has actually been a part of a lot of my IEP meetings. And thanks to Sophie for doing that. I really appreciate you took your time in doing that. It really made those meetings successful. And you're really amazing. And I really appreciate you. So thank you.
No problem, Drina. My pleasure. Jessica, did you have anything you wanted to add to the IEP discussion?
I mean, you guys pretty much covered it all. I mean, definitely make sure that your child is getting the supports they need, because I know personally I would not have gotten through high school without an IEP or without any of the supports that I needed.
100%. And, the next one on our list here is understanding the importance of self-acceptance and finding those supportive communities. And understanding that the way you are as a neurodiverse individual, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing that should, we should ideally would love to work towards a society where we understand that everybody is different, everyone's a different thinker, everybody has different needs, and come to that acceptance as a society. But that self-acceptance piece is also where we can start.
Absolutely.
Mm,
It's
yeah,
I'd argue the most important, because once you start accepting yourself, it's easier to be the authentic you in places that you're less comfortable with.
Mm,
totally agree.
that's a good point. Identifying your masking triggers. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. For me, a lot of the time my masking triggers are when accommodations that I know I have and I'm allowed to use aren't given,
Hmm.
or something that doesn't normally happen in my day happens. That can really trigger me. I've started to learn and be able to say, hey, I really appreciate what you're saying to me right now, but right now I need to take a 5-10 minute break and step out of the classroom so that I can better regulate myself and listen to what you're saying.
Yeah.
And being able to know that, hey, I have the right to do that, and that it's something that works for me, is super important. I think a lot of the times when accommodations don't work are when someone, often in authority, doesn't respect those accommodations. And often, because of societal norms, autistic people will just kind of go with it, when really it's super important to stand up and say, hey, actually, no, I have these and I'm allowed to use them.
100%. Yeah. And understanding those triggers, that advocacy part, so important, Drina, understanding the triggers. And I just want to put a little disclaimer there for children who aren't able to advocate for themselves or maybe don't have the self-awareness skills yet. to identify what their triggers are, or those critical thinking skills are still developing. They might not be able to recognize what those triggers are. It's super important, I feel like, for the parents and the educators in that child's life to understand what those masking triggers are. So not just the triggers that will, cause an individual to have a big meltdown or be super disruptive, because that, of course, we identify those really quickly as educators because they're uncomfortable for us and they make our life harder. But what is triggering masking for the neurodiverse individual, right? And that can be a little bit trickier to identify, especially if we're working with younger children or people who aren't able to identify that for themselves. We've got to take a little bit more time and dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah. I think, I mean, my masking triggers, and I totally agree with what you're saying, Sophie. But anyway, my masking triggers kind of, it's kind of like everyday life. Being outside the house, I still feel I have to mask to some degree, and especially at work, at my job, which kind of requires me to be a, no, to, how do I say, um talk well about the university, because I work at the university, and socialize with people and kind of like be the friendly face of the university. It kind of forces me to mask because I've encountered people who have well, yeah, I don't know what's going on anymore.
Okay. Yeah, so it sounds like basically stepping outside of your house or outside of your comfort zone is like everything can be a trigger as soon as you're outside of your safe space to
Yeah.
asking. So being around other people, being at work, socializing with people that maybe you don't know as well. I mean, I'm sure you have a core group or core individuals where you feel comfortable, like you said before, being your authentic self around. But outside of those experiences and outside of your safety of your home, everything just being out in the public and being out at school or at work is a masking trigger. You feel the need to mask in those situations, regardless of maybe how calm your day has been or how nice the people around you are. Uh,
Yeah.
it is a constant thing for you.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
That must be exhausting, Jessica.
It is. It is exhausting. It's the reason I come home and like have a nap
Yeah.
because I need to recharge and I need, yeah.
And
Oh yeah, absolutely.
that trick,
Naps are amazing.
yeah, naps are great. Yeah, naps are great. And that kind of trickles into our next thing is the self-care. So as a strategy, self-care. So giving yourself the downtime, letting those around you know that you need that time after a day of masking. So it sounds like naps, downtime, alone time, all kind of fit into that self-care strategy. Is there anything else um, that either of you can offer in the self-care space?
I think a lot of part of self-care is making sure to make your self-care routine. If you only sporadically give your time self-care, that's not going to be helpful. You really have to make it a committed part of your day. So, kind of like what I was saying earlier, as soon as you get home from school or work or whatever event that you've been to, give yourself 20, 30 minutes to just be alone and recharge and allow yourself to tell yourself, hey, it's okay, I'm feeling this way. It's normal. And it's important to know that this is what I need. And that's perfectly okay.
100%. Yeah, Jessica, anything you wanted to add to that?
Uh, no, I think I
I
think Julia
love,
got it. Yeah.
yeah, I love the sentiment of making it a part of your routine. So doing that sporadic self-care when you are burnt out or you completely have a burnout moment, maybe at the end of the week or once or twice a month, 100%, Gina, not enough, or even every few days. incorporating that self-care and understanding that it's okay that you need this, it's important that you need these things, and providing that to yourself on a regularly scheduled basis every single day so that you don't run into autistic burnout or a masking burnout completely, right?
Absolutely, because those are some of my least favorite things to happen to me.
Yeah, can really.
Yeah.
But so self-care, regularly scheduled on a daily basis, very important. And now jumping into part 3, which is advocacy and awareness. Before we do jump into that, I wanted to um, note that we all are wearing different clothes right now, and that's because we were taking our own advice. The last part we were talking about was coping mechanisms, strategies, and self-care. So after a while of recording last week, we decided that, you know what, we're kind of hitting a wall, we're feeling tired. And instead of pushing through that, we gave ourselves the accommodation to um, continue filming the following week. So we're practicing what we preach. Anyway, moving on to part 3, advocacy and awareness. So we're going to be talking now. There's a few sections that we want to address in this area. First one being the importance of raising awareness about neurodiverse masking. And so, Jessica, do you want to talk a little bit about why it's important to raise awareness about neurodiverse masking?
Yeah, so it's important for people to be aware about masking because first off, more people mask than you may know. Most of the time it's not really obvious unless you actually know the person. Um, it can also create more inclusive work in school spaces where all kinds of learners can have their needs met.
Mhm.
It also just makes people feel more comfortable when you acknowledge that, some people may be masking and if they're doing that, then maybe they don't feel entirely comfortable yet. So maybe you need to work on making either the space more inclusive or yourself. Um, Another good thing for people to know is that masking is draining and can be harmful short term and long term to children, youth, and adults' mental health and has long term negative effects. I know I have personally dealt with the negative effects myself, and yeah, and understanding allows for change. So the more we understand, the more we can help our peers and our fellow humans.
I
Absolutely. That's
I
true.
absolutely agree with what Jessica's saying in the sense that masking is something that is a super huge, important part of being autistic, especially at school or work or any place where you are commonly with a lot of different people. It not only is it draining, it can really stop you from being your authentic self. So by saying, hey, I am feeling really overwhelmed in this situation, or I feel like there's so much going on that I can't do this properly, can not only say to maybe all the other neurodivergent people in the room, but can also benefit the people who are like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe taking a break worked for everyone and not just the neurodivergent people. We want everyone to feel comfortable. So a great way is to make those policies on helping people demask or at least mask less part of the whole um, school experience as opposed just to the individual, because it's important to remember that while some people are diagnosed and some people may know that they're neurodivergent, not everybody might. Or maybe just some people really like having a break and that really helps them. And that's awesome too.
100%. Yeah, and that was one thing I was thinking about when Jessica was talking, and you as well, Drina, is that creating more inclusive work and school spaces is, I mean, it benefits everyone. It even benefits employers and educators and school systems because when people are feeling regulated or they're feeling more able to be their authentic selves, unmask a little bit more, you're going to get more productivity in workspaces. You're going to get more engaged learners in school spaces. So it also benefits employers and educators and school systems to work towards being more inclusive. And I would imagine that even neurotypical individuals would benefit from those inclusive spaces as well, right?
Absolutely.
Amazing. And then, so the next part that we have to talk about in advocacy and awareness is how allies can support neurodivergent individuals in unmasking. And I know, Drina, you said that you had an anecdotal story for us to share here.
Yeah, I do. For me, I had a really amazing experience recently. I go to Langara College. I'm studying library information technology. I absolutely love my program. My instructors are phenomenal, and everyone in my program is super, super amazing. I have one of my classes on Friday is my only library class that I'm taking this semester, and the instructor for that class has been really amazing for not only my accommodations personally with accessibility services, but also for the whole class. Um, she did a little experiment with some of the instructors in the staff room because she works at the public library. She works specifically at Central. That to have fidget toys in the staff room to see, she had seen how it had benefited kids and teens and wanted to see, oh, let's see how it works with the other instructors in the staff room. And it went over really well. Everybody really enjoyed it. And so she decided to bring the whole fidget box to our classes on Friday, and that's been really, really great. Everybody loves it. Gets used constantly. It's been really, really fun. Uh, Not only that, we've also our recent classes have been a lot about accessibility and accessibility specifically in the library and how one accessibility thing would help benefit everyone. So it was really fun to see how what we're talking about here was really connecting in what I was learning. I also really like, and this goes for all my library classes, um, is that the instructors are really good at giving breaks. They'll give us like maybe two 10-minute breaks or one 10-minute break, and we'll be having like 2-hour class, and that can be really, really nice. You can go get a snack, or you can go have some water, or just chat with your friends. And it's really, really been beneficial. And it's been especially beneficial, and I've noticed it a lot more having two non-library classes this semester. I've noticed that that's not necessarily a thing in the other classes, and I'm curious to maybe it's because library spaces tend to be a lot more about welcoming, or it's just maybe something the other teachers haven't noticed. But it's been really, really great, and I absolutely love my program. So I just wanted to share that college has been really good for accessibility in that sense. And I think even with the classes that we don't have breaks, I've noticed that other people look like they could also benefit from it. So maybe I'll suggest it to my instructors. I think often it's when things like maybe breaks don't happen, it's not because instructors are bad, or maybe it's just they don't recognize, oh, maybe a break would be helpful, and just bringing that conversation up can be super important. So I was really happy that I had such a great Friday class.
That's amazing. That's so great to hear. And that's such a great example of how allies can support by adjusting the environment. So, like you were talking about, allowing for breaks, bringing in fidget toys for adult learners in a college environment. What a fantastic idea, because it sounds like not only, there may be also neurodivergent people that, aren't what's the word I'm looking for, that aren't telling people that they're neurodivergent, that need those accommodations. There may be neurotypical people that can really benefit from those as well. It sounds like the whole class is. Um,
Yeah, it's been great.
Everybody needs a break. And so it's supporting neurodivergent individuals, but it's also creating so much more of an inclusive environment. You're going to get more engaged learners. You're going to get more productivity out of individuals when you're creating spaces like that. You're creating essentially safe spaces, right? And we know that children's brains, youth brains, adult brains learn and engage more productively when they feel safe and regulated.
Yeah, I also thought it was really great that since college definitely tends to be more of an adult environment, that fidget toys were brought in because often fidget toys are often seen for kids and youth.
Mhm.
And sometimes once you hit the adult stage, certain due to societal norms, certain things aren't seen as acceptable. So it's nice to see um those different norms being broken and trying to create a more accepting environment.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, moving forward, a few points that we had here that maybe Jessica or Drina, you wanted to touch on, was encouraging a culture of acceptance and understanding, the benefits of neurodiversity in society in various fields, the future hopes and goals for reducing the need for masking, and a call for action as well to for allies to support neurodiverse learners, neurodiverse workers, neurodiverse individuals, and just creating more inclusive and safe spaces in general in work environments and schools.
I mean, like, really, I feel with this podcast, that's what we're doing is encouraging a culture of acceptance and understanding. And by you listening to our lived experiences and our stories, we hope that you can have more acceptance and understanding for people, neurodiverse people. And we hope that you've learned a little bit about masking and about how for some people, it's hard to put themselves out there even when they're not talking or acting out of the norm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think also for any parents of autistic children watching, we want um, autistic voices, like especially the hashtag actually autistic, um, voices to be listened and heard to as autistic adults who have been autistic children. It's important to recognize that things that even as children we did can still come out in adults, and having those lived experiences that we have as being autistic children that we can share and help create a more accepting space. And I think, like Jessica said, that's a huge part of this podcast is to introduce more of those topics about neurodiversity and being autistic, and just allowing people to know that neurodiverse people do exist and they're always going to exist
Mhm.
in
Absolutely.
our society.
Absolutely. Well, I think this has been amazing, amazing to talk about masking, amazing to start, helping people have a different lens in which to see maybe a little bit of how neurodiverse people experience the world and how we can be allies and we can have an understanding for what's going on for those individuals, because like you said, there are probably a lot more people masking in those classrooms and those workplaces than we even know, and creating that inclusive safe environment is going to benefit everyone. So next podcast, we're going to look into talking about high masking versus low masking and the problematic terms of high functioning or low functioning autism, and kind of shed a little bit of light on that and have a discussion around the language and what that language means. So,
And,
go ahead.
like I said, if anyone watching this podcast has any questions or any specific topics they want to know more about, please feel free to send us a direct message or put it in the comments. We're happy to address these topics. Obviously, we come up with our own, but if there are any specific topics that want to be addressed, we're happy to give more insight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.